Good morning. I am your host, Casey Phoenix, and it is morning in Los Angeles and morning in America. This is my political thought for today. It won't be that long. And really, I don't know if it's much of a thought. It's more of me just talking out loud and talking things through because I watched some of the coverage on the Kenosha situation and come to find out the individual who was involved already had several run ins with the police before and not in a good way. And I will say the officer, I believe it was 7 shots. That was a little excessive. I'll say that. 2 or 3 more than likely would have been enough. But everything that's been happening over the past few years, all of these narratives that people have been sucked into, with the situation in Kenosha, the narrative that some people were sucked into or have been sucked into is that, oh, it was just another unarmed black man being shot by the police. But there isn't any context to it where there were complaints on the individual. He's had run-ins with the police before. He was an alleged offender. Also, the police asked him to stop, and he kept going to reach for whatever he was reaching for in his car. Because he had had several run-ins with the police before, they didn't know what he was reaching for. And if he would have just complied with whatever the police asked, and when they asked him, hey, stop, and he stopped, and he could have said, hey, I need to get such and such out of my car. Whether it's his license, I don't know what he would need with his license at that time because they didn't ask for his license. There were a lot of things at play there. But when it's cast out to the world, it's cast out as the narrative, unarmed black man shot by police. The same thing with George Floyd, which that was a horrible situation. Everyone agrees with that. The way he was detained was not the proper way to detain someone. But now we're finding out from the autopsy or the report, the medical report, that he had a lot of fentanyl in his system, and it was more than likely because when he encountered the police before, he tried to swallow it so he wouldn't get arrested and be charged with having drugs on him. And because he swallowed it, that is what created the breathing issues versus how he was detained when the officer had his knee on his neck, which was still wrong. That method was still wrong. But it seems like based off of the medical report, that may not be what it killed him. I look at other narratives of people saying protesters, they're peaceful protesters. The legacy media, the conventional media, the mainstream media, whatever you want to call it, keeps pushing this narrative that, oh, they were just protesting and it got out of hand. When really in several situations, it didn't start out as a protest and it didn't end as a protest. It started out as a riot and it ended as a riot. But the media, the main media, the legacy media, the conventional media, they don't hold these people accountable. And because they don't, they're pushing out this narrative that there are just protesters in the street and there might be one or two bad apples here and there, when it's a little bit more nefarious than that. Portland has been dealing with riots and attacks on federal buildings and property for 2 months. But the narrative is, oh, they're all just protesters and some are just a little rowdy. When it comes to the Russia situation, I'll give you an example. As far as I know, because I don't really watch her that often, Rachel Maddow was obsessed with Russia. When the Mueller investigation was happening, Rachel Maddow was obsessed. Every single thing related to Russia, it was on Rachel's show, because she's like, they're going to get him, they're going to get him, they're going to get him. Get Trump, get Trump, get Trump, get Trump. But back about a week ago, when Kevin Kleinsmith, a former FBI lawyer, pleaded guilty, or was said to plead guilty. I believe he pleaded guilty on Friday, if I'm not mistaken. You can check it out. Kevin Kleinsmith, he did plead guilty. And he pleaded guilty to altering a CIA communication. That is a huge deal. He didn't alter an internal document within the FBI or an internal document as if he worked at the White House or something. He altered a communication from the CIA stating that Carter Page was an asset of the United States, of the CIA, saying Carter Page is one of our assets. But Kevin Kleinsmith altered it and said, no, Carter Page is not an asset. So that would give them the ability to get the FISA warrant, because when they tried to get the FISA warrant before, they were unable to obtain it. They were rejected. But then that was altered and changed, and it's like, okay. And then, of course, the dossier, which was also fake, too. And Rachel Maddow didn't cover, as far as I know, up to this point, Kevin Kleinsmith pleading guilty to altering a document from the CIA saying that Carter Page was a U.S. asset. He didn't work for the Russians. He worked for the United States. But people bought into the narrative that Carter Page was one of the people caught up in this thing with President Trump and the Russians, when Carter Page was one of our people working with us. And the whole Russia narrative, how people didn't research it, when they didn't check out things with Joseph Mifsud, with what happened with Papadopoulos and Downer and Fusion GPS, how no one does research, it seems. They just hear something that's cast out or broadcasted by the legacy, mainstream, conventional media, and they just go with it. It's as if they're like, well, the media would never lie to us. When that's all the media has been doing is lying. It's amazing. They keep pointing their finger at President Trump, saying President Trump lies about this, President Trump lies about that. But the media has been lying for the past 5 years. Excessively. Lie after lie after lie after lie. And people, when the media broadcasts out the information, the narrative that they want out there. For some reason, so many people get sucked in. The same thing when President Trump was impeached over the Ukraine telephone call. It amazes me how so many people were sucked into that narrative when all they had to do was read the actual transcript. The transcript was available. I read the transcript. There wasn't anything there. President Trump didn't even bring up Joe Biden. He didn't do it. He didn't bring anything up. That was brought up on the other end by the Ukrainian president with CrowdStrike and all that stuff. He didn't initiate that. If you ever get a chance, read the transcript sometime for those who haven't read the transcript, because you'll see it was just a regular telephone call. And the Ukrainian president brought up certain things. So President Trump, of course, engaged and answered and said what he thought about what the Ukrainian president brought up. It was that simple. And for those of you who don't know who CrowdStrike is the third-party company who reviewed the server, which is another thing. With the whole Russia thing, anyone who has any type of critical thinking skills, if the FBI comes to you and says, if you say, we've been hacked by Russians, and the FBI is like, okay, we need to see your server. And then you say, oh no, you can't see my server. That should be a red flag. It's like, wait, what? You're telling the Federal Bureau of Investigation that you've been hacked by Russians, but they can't review the server to determine what type of hack it was and everything else and all the technicalities behind it. No, you can't review our server, our servers. And CrowdStrike was the third-party company hired by the DNC to, quote unquote, review their server and issue a report to the FBI, which is still mind-boggling to this day. I would love for somebody that I know to tell the FBI, no, you can't review that. We'll have a third party give you a report. Like, how do so many people get sucked into these narratives? Why do people not do their research? I know people have lives to live. People are living their life. I know they don't have the ability to spend hours just constantly going over information. They can only take maybe a soundbite here or a soundbite there. But there has to be at least certain things where your spidey sense might go off. And it's like, wait, what? That doesn't sound right. It doesn't sound right. Just like this whole racist narrative about the president. And speaking of racist, that racist president just pardoned another black man this week. So I don't know how much that's been covered, but he pardoned another black man because he had pardoned Jack Johnson too, as well. And also he commuted Alice Johnson, sentenced a black woman. And also he commuted some other sentences too. And the First Step Act allowed a lot of black people to get out of prison. And also he pushed for more, before he became president, he pushed for more black people to work on Wall Street. And he was also honored for his contributions in the black community, along with Rosa Parks and Muhammad Ali. But the media keeps having you think he's a racist because that's the narrative they're pushing. And people have been sucked into this narrative. And then they've been sucked into this narrative on Charlottesville, which the whole very fine people on both sides, where if you research, you will see he wasn't talking about white supremacists. As a matter of fact, he specifically condemned them. He said, I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and white supremacists. They should be totally condemned. I'm talking about the other people. He specifically said that. And with funding the HBCUs, he's funded more he's given more HBCU funding than the black president did. There was a faith-based ban on HBCUs where they could not receive funding. President Trump lifted that ban. So if he is such a racist, why did he do all of this? Why is he agreeing to do all of this legislation? Why is he pardoning black people? Why is he commuting black people's sentences? Why did he even sign the First Step Act? He didn't have to do it. And there's other things he's done behind the scenes to help people out who may have been black that we may not even know about. Because there was one, her name was Lynn Patton, I believe was her name. And she works at Housing and Urban Development. And she was an employee of his. She's a black woman. She was an employee of his. And there were things that happened in her life behind the scenes that the Trump family helped her out with. A black woman. But people have been sucked into this narrative that the president is racist. Because that's what the traditional, conventional, mainstream media has been pushing. And it amazes me how so many people continue to get sucked into these narratives. When someone is shot, when protesting or rioting happens, there's a difference between peaceful protesting and rioting. The Constitution says you can peacefully assemble, not break things, burn stuff down, and loot. If the information wasn't out there, I wouldn't be frustrated. But the information is out there. This isn't 25 years ago. This isn't 25 or 30 years ago where the information might be a little bit harder to get a hold of, where you have a stack of Encyclopedia Britannicas to get information. Everything information-wise is at your fingertips, but the media continues to lie and people continue to get sucked into the narrative instead of taking the media at their word when they've been known to lie. One of the best things that I've heard is trust but verify. Even if you trust Rachel Maddow, why don't you go to some other sources? Not another source, sources, plural. Sources outside of what her side is, and listen to the other side. One reason that I gained respect for Fox News, and Fox News has its faults too, but one reason I gained respect for them is because Fox News always had receipts. One second. My other alarm went off on my phone. Fox News always had receipts. They always seem to have that. With Tucker Carlson, with Sean Hannity, with Laura Ingraham, whoever it is, they usually have receipts. And that's one thing I noticed. That's why I started watching Fox News more. Because on the other side, it was always, well, I heard from such and such, and anonymous sources say this, and that. And it's like, okay, anonymous. But on Fox's side, they do have anonymous sources from time to time, but more times than not, Fox has receipts. The whole thing with CrowdStrike, Fusion GPS, and all that stuff, they had the receipts. That's why I respect Glenn Beck when he broke down the whole Ukraine situation, which is so messy and so corrupt and so just, there are so many adjectives you could give that situation. It's ridiculous. And they're not good adjectives when it comes to the Ukraine situation. What happened behind the scenes and what went on with how the money went missing and how one of the banks had given the money to an oligarch, and it's crazy. But when Glenn Beck broke it down, he broke it down with receipts. It wasn't, well, I heard and this person said. No, he had receipts. That's why I respect Fox News, for them being able to mostly produce receipts. Can they be hyperbolic sometimes? Yeah, Sean can be hyperbolic sometimes, even though I still watch the show. But in the midst of all of that, he still has receipts. Sarah Carter gets in and pulls the actual information. Greg Jarrett pulls the actual information. That way, you can see what it really is and make a decision for yourself. It's not anyone heard. So when I see people get caught in this narrative or in these narratives and not bother to look for the receipts, the actual receipts, what really happened, that's what frustrates me. That's what really frustrates me. It's frustrating that people don't do their research. And I'm looking to be more empathetic, that people don't always have the time. However, if you have the time to constantly criticize, or if you have the time to loot and burn and riot and protest, then you have the time to do research. And I wish people would do more research and not get sucked in to these narratives, because the narratives are for a reason. The narratives are to keep people emotionally destabilized. When someone is emotionally destabilized, they can't think properly. They can't do anything. Their critical thinking is suspended. When you're in your emotions and in your heart, it's rare you can use your mind. And one of the best quotes I ever heard was actually from an anime, believe it or not, the English dub version of it. And it said, "My mind is my power. Power is my mind. When uncorrupted by other elements, my mind becomes my purest power." I wish people would stop getting sucked into these false narratives and learn to fully use the power of their mind and stop going off of emotion alone. and do more research. And that's all I have for my political thought today. Thank you to those who have been watching and listening. As you may already know, thepurpleelephantshow.com is the main podcasting platform. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. And my political thought is a supplement to The Purple Elephant Show. The Purple Elephant Show is a weekend show. Don't forget to swing by Facebook, facebook.com/The Purple Elephant Show, to give a like on the page. Also, you can follow on Parler, The Purple Elephant Show, Instagram, The Purple Elephant Show, and Twitter @RealTPES. And that's all I have. Thank you again to everyone. I appreciate the support. Be blessed.